Today's topic, the vanishing trial. Kevin Ring became president of FAMM in January 2017, succeeding founder Julie Stewart. Ring previously served as the group's vice president and director of strategic initiatives. Ring has testified before Congress and state legislatures across the country regarding sentencing and prison reform. He has been profiled in various national publications, including the Wall Street Journal, National Journal, and the Hill newspaper. He has appeared as a justice reform expert on Fox News, CBS News, MSNBC, Headline News, National Public Radio, Al Jazeera, and many other television and radio outlets. He has spoken at major conferences and events, including TripFest, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Conference, Conservative Political Action Conference, and the Variety/Rolling Stone Criminal Justice Summit. His writings have been published in numerous outlets, including USA Today, The Washington Post, The Washington Times, The Hill. As Deputy Director of Policy at FAMM, Tinsae Gebriel supports federal and state advocacy campaigns. She received her master's in public policy with a concentration in urban and social policy from the George Washington University, and her BA in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Maryland, College Park. Prior to joining FAMM, Tinsae participated in the U.S. Department of Justice Pathways program for 2 years as a paralegal specialist trainee. Tinsae is passionate about promoting equity within the criminal justice system.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for this special one-time only weekend screening of The Vanishing Trial. And this morning we have joined with us Mr. Kevin Ring, who is the president of FAMM, and Tinsae Gebriel, who is the deputy director of policy for FAMM. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our panel, we have two panels we're going to present to you this morning. Our first panel, we will discuss some legal and policy related issues specific to trial penalty. Panel 2 will come on at 11:15, and that particular panel will be involving individuals who have been impacted by the trial penalty. At 11:45, we'll bring the full panel back, both panel 1 and 2, so that we can take time to answer any viewer questions. So thank you, and let's get started. Kevin, I'm curious to know who benefits from trial penalty. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, it's really about efficiency for prosecutors who want to make a lot of cases quickly. It costs a lot and it's hard work to bring everybody to trial. And so, in the 1980s, we had about 20% of the people would go to trial. And over time, because of strict mandatory sentencing laws, strict sentencing guidelines, the more tools you gave the prosecutor to coerce people into pleading guilty, the easier it got to do that job. And, lawmakers supported it because prosecutors were saying, I can do my job, I can get these convictions, and I can go up the chain of conspiracy because I can get everybody to cooperate against one another. And so that coercion, just like, anybody who has a tool that helps them do their job easier, they want to keep. And so that's really what it's about. It's about privileging efficiency over justice.
There's so much that is all the way wrong with that. I mean, okay, I think this is probably one of the most difficult episodes that I've done. When you see it broken down the way it is broken down, and after viewing The Vanishing Trial, I thought I've seen a lot, done a lot in this space, but I'm having a difficult time because the intentionality with putting efficiency over human life and being able to see the potential in people and the waste that they're contributing to in terms of life wasted is It's not explainable in any kind of form, shape, or fashion.
Yeah, we work with, tons of families who have been impacted by the justice system in different ways. And then when we did the initial screening of this, the feedback was incredible. Every family was moved because they said, that's exactly what happened to us. Everyone who's been through the system knows exactly what this is like. And I think people who haven't don't know this happens. But anybody who's run up against, the justice system, this is how it plays out. It's threatening tons of charges, scaring the heck out of people, and then getting them to, plead and go away. And it doesn't feel like justice, it feels like a game. And like I said, it was amazing. Every family said, oh my gosh, that brought back so many memories. That's exactly what we went through.
The story about Chris Young and the judge that stepped down and retired after 3 years, and he cited that particular case as the reason why. Where do the judges play in all of this in terms of their discretion? Are they having to follow sentencing guidelines with no ability to detour from that, or make a departure from what is recommended?
Tinsae, you want to answer?
Well, I think that's where mandatory minimums come in. With Chris's case, the judge didn't have any discretion and he had to give him a life sentence. So when you have mandatory prison terms, and when you have, at least in some states, mandatory sentencing guidelines, there really is no way for the judge to depart from these extremely long sentences.
Okay. Challenging the government. Kevin, you mentioned that you had all kinds of resources. You were a lawyer, you had resources out the wazoo, and that still did not help you. Let's think about those who don't have resources, who perhaps don't have the educational background that you had to know how to maybe manipulate the system not in a bad way, but navigate it. How do you advise families, everyday families, who are working 2 and 3 jobs, kids, and in this environment, virtual schooling, virtual working? How do you advise them to not allow their family members to be railroaded in this manner? What do you say?
Well, one, I should say, I mean, we don't provide legal advice, so we, but we see it happen. And, there's no options. When the government decides that you're the bad guy or the bad girl, your options are limited. To go to trial is expensive and difficult, and to beat the government, because usually, even if you think you're innocent or you are innocent, there's some evidence that is, questionable, that's going to make it hard for you to win in front of a jury. And so that's why, I mean, the movie talks about, less than 3% of people go to trial today. We have given up this right almost completely. And so there's not much you can say to people. And that's why a lot of defense attorneys, it's just about, what are the charges? I'll try to get you a good deal. That's all it is. I'll try to get you a good deal from the prosecutor, and sort of point out factors about your life or history or something about the nature of the offense or your role in it, to get you a better deal. But it's just a bargaining process. You don't have any leverage, because they can send you away for 5 or 10 years. And, the biggest thing was, I was a lawyer by trade. And so I at least knew a little bit about the system. I knew that I wasn't facing a mandatory sentence. I still had friends who said to me, who were real law and order types, oh, just plead guilty, just make this go away. And these are people who believe in the system. And I said, how can you say that? You know that I'm not guilty. And they said, I know, but you don't want to risk this. So that's a bad thing, that people who otherwise believe in the system realize it can produce injustices. And, I don't know how you get away from that unless you take away these tools from the prosecutors.
Tinsae, how is this happening? Meaning, if you have a constitutional right to a trial, how is this being allowed to occur?
I think I understand your question. Well, that's just, I think what we talked about earlier, what Kevin mentioned is just about efficiency of the system. This is the way that cases are supposed to, I mean, they're seen as cases and not human beings going through the system, right? So it's about efficiency and caseloads and what works best for prosecutors. So efficiency just trumps anything else within a
But
criminal.
I'm not a lawyer, okay? So what I'm asking is this, legally, how is this being allowed to happen? You can't fight this legally, the coercion?
Actually, this has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided, I think it was 1976, that threatening people is part of the job, essentially. That because prosecutors are allowed to decide what charges to bring, and because they're allowed to give people credit for cooperating and pleading guilty, which are values that I think are okay, that the government, that the justice or the courts are not going to step in and decide when that line becomes coercion, because coercion runs through the whole system. I mean, that whole idea of being able to say to somebody, plead guilty and cooperate and you get 2 years, or not and get 20 years, that is the system we have. So the courts aren't going to step in and knock that down, because they think that's what the lawmakers wanted.
Okay,
Sandra Avery
let's
was
talk
released
about
from
the machinery of the justice system. Let's give our viewers some insight. I mean, this is a behemoth, and I would like for them to understand why it is so important to understand their rights, to know their rights, and to know that this system is so massive that we cannot afford to sit back and just say, oh, that's them. We need more advocacy, more boots on the ground, people talking about what is wrong with the system, because this is another reason why reform is so necessary. Help our viewers understand, because a lot of times when this is not their issue, is not affecting their household, they have a lot of snide comments and remarks to make. This could be you any given moment. And I need for our viewers to become more sensitized to the fact that this could have happened in your family. Help me out.
Well, I was just going to say, I think for a lot of us, we believe what we see on TV is what the justice system is actually what it is.
Mhm.
And so we assume if, you do interact with the system, you assume it's going to be the same way that you see law and order. And so I think it's up to us to use this film and other resources to educate the people about the reality of what a trial process looks like.
Mhm.
And also there are other ways for us to advocate for change, to chip away at the trial penalty. And a lot of what we do at FAMM and advocating for reform of mandatory sentences could help with this issue as well too.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you, what is the legislative advocacy piece looking like? How do you get this overturned? How do you get this trial penalty just done away with? Is there a way to do that?
Well, it's a little bit complicated, because all branches play a role in it. You have the legislature who creates mandatory sentences and mandatory guidelines, so they create these harsh punishments. And then you have the prosecutors who use them and say, well, the legislature gave me this, they want me to use it. And then you have judges who say, my hands are tied, I can't fix this because it's mandatory. And everyone says, I'm just doing my job. And in the process, people fall through the cracks. So, Kevin Sharp, Judge Sharp, who resigned, I mean, that's rare. But we hear from lots of judges who say, I just give out the punishments. I don't get to make a decision. I don't have any discretion. I have to give this punishment. And so you have judges saying that on the record. So like I said, it's all the branches contribute to it. So if you're going to reform it, you have to approach all the branches. And so that's what makes it a little complicated. In this movie, we just wanted to highlight that this is a problem that exists. Because
Right.
most people don't realize that. They know they have a right to trial. They watch Law and Order, and every episode ends in a trial, but
Right.
that doesn't happen in real life. So we
Right.
just want to communicate that there's a problem. To fix it, though, you have to address all the pieces. So you have to take away the threat of long sentences, mandatory sentences that take away judges' discretion. You have to have prosecutors who don't see their job as just racking up convictions, but doing justice and trying to, use the sentencing laws and the policies wisely and humanely, and not just about sending people away for as long as they can. And then we got to restore discretion to judges, because sometimes even when judges have discretion, they're hammering people too. And
Right.
so all three branches have to, be changed here. And we need, it's really a culture change.
Okay. So the Justice Beat Talk Show is about equipping, educating, and empowering common folk. We're not talking about the policy wonks in DC and the lawyers and everybody else that pretty much knows what the deal is. We're talking about folks on the ground who really just don't know anything about how to even advocate for legislation or any of those things, right? What would be your call to actions? How can regular folk get involved? What can they do? What are some call to actions that you can leave our viewers with that allows them to feel as if they have had some type of contribution in this space?
Well, I think two call to actions that they could do is, one, if they're able to, locate who their lawmakers are, and if they can't, they go to FAMM.org and we can help them with that. They can urge their lawmakers to repeal mandatory minimum sentences, because that will, again, take away some of the coercive components of a plea bargaining. So that would be one call to action for people to do, is call your lawmakers and tell them you don't support mandatory minimums, and tell them to repeal it, because that power is within the legislature to do.
Okay, so now that we're giving a call to action though, Tinsae, and you mentioned repealing the mandatory minimums, let's educate the public a little bit. What is a mandatory minimum? A lot of folks don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah, so a mandatory minimum, these are mandatory prison terms that are created for certain crimes, usually like drugs or guns, and they're created by the legislature. So state legislature or Congress creates it. So by the time that a person is in the courtroom, and if they're, guilty of that crime, the judge has absolutely no discretion to depart from that whatever mandatory prison term that the lawmakers created.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, that's problematic, because as a judge, there might be some unique circumstances of a case of the person or needs that they have, but you can't even take that to account because the lawmakers have told you you have to give them 10 years, 20 years, and with Chris Young's case in the film, life sentence. So as you can see, that's extremely problematic, and so urging lawmakers to repeal that is important.
Okay, so that's call to action number one. Do you have another one?
Another one is, I think, we just went through an election cycle, but your local elections are really important. So who your county prosecutors are, a lot of these people are elected, so you can see on their platforms, or if they don't even have it on their platforms, on their website or whatever the case may be, you can ask them, you can tell them not to promote or to penalize people who seek trial when they are, when they don't take a plea. So those are things that you can do to make sure that there's a fair trial process for people.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to say, and that's a lot to do. I mean, like you said, people have jobs, and it's hard to, become politically aware and get involved. But I would say just ally yourself with groups that are doing this work. So like FAMM does this. We track the elections, right? So I'll just say the easiest thing you can do right now is text chances, the word chances, to 21333, because let somebody else do some of this work for you, right? Like, we evaluate candidates. We question all the candidates and ask them to complete a survey about where they stood on these issues. We do the legislative advocacy that needs to be done. And what we need, because we have policy experts,
right.
We need an army. We need people who say, I support this or I oppose that. Mm-hmm. Because we still are in a democracy, and lawmakers are going to listen to their constituents. The reason they pass these tough on crime laws is because they think that's what's going to get them reelected. If they thought something else was going to get them elected, they do that. And so our job is to convince them that they have constituents who have been negatively affected by these laws and they want change. And I mean, I know people are cynical about government, but the cynicism should come because everyone always says, oh, my guy doesn't listen. All he wants to do is get reelected. Well, that's our opportunity. I mean,
Right.
that's what they want. They need to know that it's politically a problem for them if they don't support reform. Right now, we have a lot of lawmakers who are starting to support reform. It's not as dangerous as it used to be. They're not being called soft on crime.
Yeah, politically dangerous. Hmm.
Yeah, but it's not a priority. So they're willing to support it, but they're not proposing it, and they're not pushing it, and they're not, and so that's what we need to do. But to do that, we need people. We need people to say, and people like me, and part of the reason I didn't really want to be in this film, but it was to say this is affecting people from all walks of life. Because after it happened to me, I had neighbors coming up to me quietly, one at a time, saying, "Hey, I've never told anybody, but my brother went to prison for drugs," or "My father went to," and no one talks about it because there's such shame and stigma. But if like our organization, we bring those families together, and then they're empowered to take action, and you start to get away from that stigma.
Right. Okay. Tinsae, can you
Yes.
shed some light on mandatory minimums in Missouri?
Well, I do understand that Missouri has mandatory prison terms. So just depending on outside of a certain class of offenses, and depending on if you have any prior convictions, you do have to serve like 40, 50 to 70% of your sentence before you're eligible for parole. So definitely an issue also in Missouri.
Okay. Okay. And would you recommend the call to actions, the same call to actions would be effective in? Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about women. What has your work been like, Tinsae, around the women? Because in the screening, they mentioned women are the fastest growing population in the system. And then when you think about that, you think about how many women are having to leave children behind. What is that picture looking like around trial penalty?
Well, I think when Sandra comes on, she'll probably use her, life experience to shed more
Exactly.
light
I'm going
into
to ask her.
his.
Yeah.
But I mean, from what we saw in the film as well, too, a lot of times when women interact with the system, it's because of maybe they have a loved one, a boyfriend, a husband who, has other issues with the system. So with Sandra's case, with conspiracy and things like that, and what's called like the girlfriend problem.
Right.
And as we learn in the film as well, too, a lot of times the way that the trial penalty penalizes women more is because maybe they're less likely to take a plea. There's like a coercive nature in the relationship that they're having with their loved one who's also, going through the trial process. And therefore they opt for a trial, and then they get a very, very lengthy sentence.
Right.
And I do also want to talk more about, in addition to women, I think
Right.
the racial disparities are also important to know.
You're on my sheet. That was
Okay.
my next question. Disparities. Right. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I think the trial penalty, like we've been saying all morning, is just a system of our broken, justice system,
Mhm.
right? And as we know, Black and Brown people through each step of the system are impacted disproportionately. So, from policing, pretrial, and in the way that it plays out here in sentencing and in charging decisions of prosecutors is often Black people and people who are low income don't get as nice of a plea offer as their white counterparts.
Mhm.
And, I've mentioned mandatory minimums earlier, and when it comes to that and how it creates such a coercive nature within the plea bargaining process, well, Black and Brown people are also harshly impacted by mandatory sentences. So oftentimes we see, at least at the federal level through study, that Black people are actually more likely to be charged and convicted of sentences that carry mandatory prison terms.
Mhm.
So you can just see how all of that could, come together and impact lower income Black and Brown people more harshly.
Mhm. Have you guys done any kind of studies around the disparities with trial penalty in Black and Brown communities versus white communities?
The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers wrote really the seminal report on the trial penalty.
Okay.
I think data, it's hard to like pinpoint the data.
Right.
What they found, and what Lisa Wayne from NACDL said in the film, is that you really see it in the offers that are made. Chris Young, even his offer was, I think, 12 or 14 years. And so that's where, so that's an example where bias creeps in. And then the other thing that happens, as Tinsae said, is all these different system actors play a role. If you're in an over-policed community and you pick up a couple of lower level charges, all of a sudden, when you finally commit some other crime, now you're a 3-time offender, you're a habitual offender, you're a 3 strikes and out person, right? So now you're facing the life sentence or the enhanced sentence because you have this long criminal history. But it may have been really minor offenses, and you're just in a community that gets over policed.
Right.
So, so it's all the ways that you interact with the system then can come out in your sentence and the offer you get at a plea. Because no matter what I did, I was seen as a first-time offender. Well, I might have committed as many crimes as somebody else did. I just didn't get caught, right? So that's where you see a lot. That's where you see racial bias come into.
Is the offer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, look, and we know there's even just studies that show just, implicit bias in judges. I mean, there are studies that show darker skinned Black people get longer sentences than lighter skinned Black people, who get shorter sentences or get longer sentences than white people. Just, there's bias comes in so many ways.
All the way around.
Yeah, and that's why, and that's what's so obnoxious about mandatory sentences. They were originally thought that they might cure bias because they would give a one-size-fits-all punishment. And so if you had some racially biased judge, you could cabin them in by saying they get the sentence. But all it did was take the discretion from the judge and give it to the prosecutor. So now the prosecutor decides who's going to get the mandatory, and they are subject to the same biases as anybody else is. So you want a system, if you were writing a paper, you'd want as many people to look at it and give you edits. And that's how a sentence should be formed. It's like you committed a crime, the prosecutor should recommend a sentence, the judge should then weigh in and decide the sentence. If the judge is wrong, it can be appealed and go to the next level. Yes. You want as many actors in to squeeze out bias. And instead, one size fits all punishment gives the prosecutor everything.
Whew. Okay, this is, oh boy, we have a lot of work to do here. Oh my God, this is very daunting and extremely sad. But we're going to continue to harp at this reform piece. There's so many different layers in the reform space that need to be attacked. It's like you don't even know where to start first sometimes. But we're going to remain hopeful and keep plugging away and peeling back those layers. Again, this is why it's so important to pay attention to what's going on locally in your community. The race, when the races come up, prosecutors, folks you need to be voting for. God, that's why you need to participate. This is no game. It's not just about the higher races at the national level, but the local, because that's where most people are impacted. All right, I'd like to leave you guys with some parting words before we move on to panel 2. Tinsae, you have anything you'd like to leave with the viewers?
Well, I just want to tell folks to get plugged in with FAMM. Obviously, text chances to 21333, go to famm.org. A lot of ways that you can advocate. We could help you through that process. I know a lot of the information can be daunting, but I think it's easier to do it in a group so definitely text chances 21333.
Do you have any legislative activities coming up? People can participate online, because I know a lot of activities have moved virtually, and that may be one way for them to become more informed about some things at the policy level.
Yes, so if you go to famm.org and sign up for our emails, we do work at the state and federal levels. So if there are any issues coming up wherever you are, we're going to be sure to let you know. If there are opportunities to train you on advocacy, on telling your story, please just sign up for our emails on our website, famm.org.
Great, thank you, Tinsae. Kevin?
Well, I would just say, we made this film, we're an advocacy group, and at one level we're trying to change laws, every day. And on another track, we're trying to change hearts and minds so that we can get reforms. Mm-hmm. So this film was made with the idea that here's a problem that people don't know that exists, that people are forfeiting their right to trial, that people are getting long sentences that don't fit the crime. I can't tell you how many times somebody says, well, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. And it just begs the question, what's the right amount of time? And who makes that decision? right? I mean, everyone is for people being held accountable when they screw up. It's just you want that punishment to be proportionate. And the trial penalty is a perfect example of how that doesn't happen. So I would just say a real easy thing to do is get your friends and family to watch this, become aware of this, and then, yeah, then plug in to groups like ours. There's a lot of groups working at the state and federal level, but just get smarter about this. And this is a really easy entry point, because through these stories, we're just trying to bring it home to people how it happens.
Yes.
And then you got to go for solutions.
Excellent. All right, Tinsae and Kevin, thank you so much. You brought some tremendous insight and awareness. We're going to move on to panel 2. And then after panel 2, we'll bring everybody back so we can get some questions answered by our viewers, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sandra Avery was released from prison in 2016 when her life sentence was commuted by President Obama. She served almost 11 years in prison after she was convicted on her husband's charges for drug conspiracy. Because of Sandra's priors involving very small amounts of possession of cocaine during a period battling addiction, the prosecutor in Sandra's case asked for mandatory life. Her life sentences was especially unfair considering the fact that earlier he had offered Sandra a plea deal for 10 years, which she turned down. Her decision to invoke her right to a fair trial cost her a heavy trial penalty, her life. Fortunately, clemency had righted the particular wrong, and Sandra, now sober and hopeful, has a second chance. She currently works as an accountant and has learned to captain a riverboat. Karla McKinney is a graduate of FAMM University in St. Louis, Missouri, with a degree in education specializing in mathematics. She has walked alongside a family in Kansas City whose son has been incarcerated for the past 15 months. The same young man is a former student of Ms. McKinney's, who she also assisted with admission into college the year prior to his incarceration.
Good morning and welcome back to our panel 2 discussion, in which we will be talking with 2 panelists who actually have experience with trial penalty and or maybe supporting someone that is going through this whole impact of trial penalty. As you can see here, we have Ms. Sandra Avery, who was featured in the Vanishing trial with us. And we also have Ms. Karla McKinney, who is a family support representative to a family in Kansas City experiencing trial penalty. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and spending time with our viewers. Let's get started. Sandra, let's talk about the growing number of women experiencing trial penalty and the impact on them. Because when you think about women, you think about family, you think about children. How is trial penalty impacting the growing number of women entering the system?
Well, one thing I want to mention is the reason that there's such a growing number of women is because, and it ties into what you said in the first panel, when you said you get a lot of snide remarks from different people, and how can we tell them this could happen to you? Well, what happens is in the federal system that you have people that are very low level. Someone could just be smoking pot in your family, and you think there's not much to that because they'll grow out of it. They're young or whatever. If they call someone who happens to be under federal investigation at the time, now they're part of that conspiracy. All they got to do is call up and ask for a bag of pot, and now they're part of that federal conspiracy. And a lot of the women that I met and that I lived with for many years were there just because they simply were involved in the conspiracy in that small level. And so now they're sentenced to life because they went to trial. They didn't understand the same situation I was in, or they got 10 years for something very small because they were part of a conspiracy, a huge conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
And these women are devastated. They lose their rights to their children.
Mm-hmm.
The judges will take away their children. And I've seen people, try to commit suicide after these things have happened. It's devastating for them. It's a very, very bad situation. Not only that, but the children themselves. I've read the letters they've written. I've seen them in visitation. and they're so sad, and
Yeah.
it creates a generational curse, because
Yeah.
now that child has to contend with their pain.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that pain and that suffering as a child is what brings them to want to do drugs later, because it makes them feel better.
Mhm.
And it's a vicious circle.
Because of the shame, guilt, and fear and stigma associated with the parent having been incarcerated, you got another generation that has experienced a trauma, but indirect trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Can you share with our viewers, when you talk about conspiracy, what that looks like? What is conspiracy at that level?
Well, it's conspiracy at that level is anyone. Well, someone could be under investigation for running a meth lab, and that investigation by the federal government could last 6, 8 months, a year, and all during that time, anyone that they see being part of that in any way, whether it be huge or tiny. They may just run to the drugstore to get the guy some Sudafed, so that, and they're paying a little less for their drug habit because they did this for the man. Now they're part of this conspiracy, and they're subject to everything. Like in my case, it was a conspiracy. If they had separated our trials, they would have had to drop my case. They had nothing on me. All they had was the fact that I had the knowledge of what my husband was doing. Conspiracy shouldn't be just knowledge. It should be you had to play a part. But anyway, the point is, even if you played a very small part, which most women do, most women are just involved in a small way. And they may just have knowledge or be married to the guy or whatever the case may be. And now they're getting every charge that the main person is getting. Every indictment is listed the exact same way as it was for the main conspirator.
Okay, Miss McKinney.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Now, you're a family support representative to a
Yes.
family in KC. And as was read on your bio, you happen to be a mathematics teacher who had this young man in your class. You also played an integral part in helping him to get into college prior to his incarceration. Give us some background on this young man and bring us up to speed about where he is today in relation to what he's experiencing. And you're free to begin.
All right. Well, thank you. And once again, Justice Beat, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I also want to thank his parents for allowing me to speak on his behalf. Like it was spoken in my bio, I am a mathematics teacher. I taught in Kansas City, Missouri at De La Salle Charter High School. I had this young man in my class, had him for 3 years. Good young man, but like all kids, they do things. But very respectful young man. He graduated. There was a team of individuals who helped him to get into college, and he was accepted to Harris-Stowe State University in St. Louis, Missouri, where he completed a year. He comes home, does what young people do. They, jobs, earning some money. And just as he was preparing to return to school, sometimes there are people in our lives that are on a different trajectory that we are, but we still want to stay connected to them. And that's where his troubles began, being connected with people maybe we should no longer have a close connection to. So he finds himself arrested on armed robbery charges and some other charges. Wasn't present, but he had knowledge and was with the individuals when they were arrested. So here he is. I know and I don't know if it's okay for me to say, but I will. He's in Clay County Jail, just outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And he's falling. When I was watching the movie, that is his current situation right now. When I was watching it and I was listening, I'm saying, man, this couldn't be more his current situation than anything else I've ever seen. So his parents do like our parents do. We get a lawyer. We believe that they're working on our behalf. The concern became this particular lawyer close relationship with the prosecutor. That became to be what was speaking out. Lawyers say, you know, I got a close relationship with the prosecutor. We can do this, we can do that. And wanting him to plead to a crime that he did not commit. So here we're on the outside supporting him, encouraging him, let's hold out, let's go to trial. And the very thing that's said in the movie, being faced with more time if you go to trial versus pleading and being able to go home. Mm-hmm. Just so you can, you know, like they said, go home in 2 or 3 years, or in his case, time served. So you plead, then you're wedded to a system that you really don't want to be wedded to. You know, you gamble and go to trial, then you're faced with all this time. And then so he's in this quandary, a young man, 20, I believe he's 21, 22. He's been there 18 months. Every time that he has gone back to court, after the first or second time, his lawyer just stopped showing up. And he didn't have anything to present. So what happens is that the case gets continued over and over and over again, and as if they're waiting on him to say, okay, I'm just going to go plead so I can get this time, and I can either go home or I won't have much more time to serve. So one of the things that his parents and I are thinking is, you're going before the judge. They're looking at how many times that you have come before me. Why is the case not moving? Why has there not been a court date set? So his parents right now have severed ties with that particular lawyer. So where are they now? Well, once again, they fall into this category of not having a lot of resources to help their son. So they're sitting and waiting, and they're looking for what path, what avenue do they need to travel to help their son right now. So I'm here as a family support. I don't have the resources. I don't have all the knowledge, but I'm looking to those who do to help them navigate what their next step should be and give awareness to his situation and situation for other parents who are sitting in this same place and do not know what to do. So that's my role here today as a family support. I'm an educator. This is a young man who was sitting in my classroom. It's easy for me to walk away. I'm no longer in Kansas City, Missouri. We've moved during this time to Memphis, Tennessee. But I told his parents and I told him, I'm going to see this thing through. I'm going to do what I can to connect you to those who can help you. So that's why I'm here today.
Okay. First of all, this is what we need more of. When you know that someone has a need, you may not necessarily have the resources, but to connect them to those who can help. Because this young man, as you said, is set for 18 months. The attorney stopped showing up. Continuouses keep happening every time he goes before the judge. And that has got to be excruciatingly painful for him to sit all this time. Now, let me ask this question. So where is he in terms of, is he saying, okay, look, I didn't do this, I'm not guilty, and I'm not pleading? Are they trying to get him to plead guilty?
Yes, they're trying to get him to plead guilty because of his association. They will not, say what evidence that they have against him because he knows there isn't any. And even he's saying to himself, if you really have the evidence to say that I am guilty, why don't you set a court date and let's go to trial and see what comes of it? But they would not even set a court date. So his position is, I'm not guilty. I'm going to take my chance at court. I'm not going to plead to a crime that I did not commit.
Okay. All right. Sandra,
Yes.
this is amazing. This is what we're seeing. And you've been through it. And you've had, I don't know if you're still are you in a support role with other women who may be going through this?
No, I'm still in a support role for those that are still incarcerated.
Right. That's what I'm referring to.
Right. Yes.
And what are you saying to them about their situation as a support in supportive capacity? How do you keep them encouraged? How do you keep them from breaking, from giving in?
Well, I had a life sentence, and I'm free. So it does happen.
Mhm.
And I believe in God, and I believe in prayer, and I do absolutely promote that, because it took an act of God to get me out of that mess.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I had the Human Rights Watch jumped on it and did a story, and then they hooked me up with a Crowell and Mooring, who tried to help me with the advocacy to the president, and then FAMM got involved, and then the president himself came up with this clemency. It was all way too huge. They picked me out of 250,000 people.
Mhm.
It was too huge not to be God. So that's what I advocate to them.
Right.
That it doesn't matter what President Trump says, or it doesn't matter what your situation is. Miracles can happen. You just have to believe it. And just one day something's going to break and you're going to walk out. So you just got to believe that. And that's the only advice I can give them right now until we can get some of these laws changed.
Yes. Yes. So, okay, so Ms. McKinney, we're going to be believing for this young man, but yet also connecting him to resources. We've got to figure out ways where we can advocate on his behalf as a collective community. It's not enough just to know something, but once you have become aware of something and you have the knowledge, you now must do something. It's different when you don't know, but when you know, there's a different level of responsibility.
And I just want to add, Sandra said something. This is also a support system. And, I'm reaching out to friends that he went to school with, family members. We have to keep individuals who find themselves in this predicament, we have to keep them encouraged. We have to give them hope. We have to let them know that we're standing with him. Initially, when things happen, especially when it's a family member or someone that we know, we want to go in on why were you there? Why were you doing? But even I had to step back for a moment and say to myself, what is the immediate concern? And for me is that although that you have gotten yourself entangled with the justice system, let's make sure that it's justice being done. You move, at least I did, move quickly from being upset and angry with him to immediately saying, okay, what do I need to do to help him maintain hope and get him the resources necessary that true justice is served on his behalf?
And you're absolutely right, because the most important thing for the person that is incarcerated and in this hopeless situation is hope. If they don't have hope, even they reach out for false hope. Any kind of hope keeps them alive. And it's the day that they lose all hope,
Yes.
it's a sad day. And
Yes.
I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again. It's a very sad day. That's why you'll hear them call you up and say, I heard this story in a lot of, we used to call it inmate.com, because a lot of it was false hope, but they hold on to that and they'll pass it on to you. And what you shouldn't do is shoot that down. Even if you know it's false hope, say, I'll look into it. I'll try.
Yes.
I'll see what I can find out. Anything to keep them alive while they're dealing with this.
Exactly.
How do you support the family? We talked about the young man or the young women that you're working with, Sandra, but I'm sure this family is needing support. What does that look like to support the family on the outside that's trying to hold it together?
Right. The families, they feel hopeless. They want to help and they don't know what to do. And even if they know what to do, they can't because they don't have the resources or they get shot down and they lose hope a lot easily.
Mhm.
So the best thing is, again, to keep them hopeful. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's call the universities and see if any of the students are working, will try to advocate us or to look into this for us. And just keep searching for information like you are. What you're doing, keep on doing.
Mhm.
And encourage the family the same way you do the incarcerated person, because they need that same hope.
Right. Ms. McKinney, what kind of support have you been to the family per se? I know you've been providing encouragement, but what does that support look like on your end?
On my end, it has been when I was there in the Kansas City area. I attended a couple of the court hearings. I'm in contact with his mom, not on a daily basis, but every now and then I shoot her an email. I've made her aware of this particular show and things that we're talking about to keep her encouraged that you're not, first of all, you're not praying by yourself. I'm praying with you. I send her a prayer every now and then. We just exchange, something that Sandra just said, she says, me and my husband just don't know what to do. And honestly, I don't either. But we're going to not know what to do together, but we're going to pray in the meantime. And then in conversation with my husband, and then you, Miss Elaine, talking about this show, my husband says, that's Tonnell's case. A light bulb. Okay, maybe I can go and speak on the parents' behalf. Because sometimes parents want to they want to do, but they can't be all places at all times. So what God does, he inserts us into people's lives.
Yes.
So that we can stand in the gap for them when they're not able to.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we can only go so far. And God has called us, like Sandra with her situation, called us to bring them the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. Until we can turn that over to someone else and we get a resolution to his situation as others. So my support, and it has even been monetarily for the young man, have sent him funds when I'm able to, whatever I can, to let him know that he's not alone.
Right, that he's not forgotten. Yeah. Wow. Okay. First of all, let me thank you, ladies, because I'm sure there are people who are watching, and because of the guilt and shame and stigma around issues that have to do with contact with the system, they may not be telling people what they're going through, that they've got a child in the system, and they don't want anyone to know. This is also why we do this show. We have to flood our community with resources and information so people are not moving around in the dark, that they can find people that they can reach out to, and they can learn about the things that they need to learn about to help them further along. As you said, Ms. McKinney, each one of us are used to be of a help to somebody else. We're not supposed to sit back in isolation as if it's just me and mine, and that's it. And I applaud you ladies for staying connected, to recognizing where there was a need and you stepped in, and continuing to support these individuals, because that's important. It is extremely important. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything that you would like to leave with our viewers before we move into our Q&A panel? We're going to open up for questions and answers for our viewers. Anything you'd like to leave with any final remarks?
Well, for myself, I would just, like I said, I'm here as a family support. And I think you may have said it earlier in the show, sometimes until a situation affects our immediate family, we have a tendency not to move. Well, we find ourselves as educators, we find ourselves as being leaders. I was never in the classroom just to teach math. I was working at a school where students had a need beyond the coursework that I was teaching them. And we have to reach out when we see these needs. We have to, whatever we can do, we have to become involved. At whatever level your involvement is, families appreciate it. They'll appreciate a phone call. They'll appreciate a text every now and then. I'm just in, you may think or believe you have nothing to give.
Right.
You don't know how much of being, you thinking of someone means to them.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know that they're not forgotten, that someone is praying on their behalf. And if prayer is all that you have to give, let me tell you, it is the best thing to give.
Amen.
Sandra?
And Karla, I just wanted to comment on, I think that it's very important what you said about, you can be mad at him later.
Yes.
You know, right now, and I just want to put that out there for all those concerned. You can be mad at them, you can advise them later. But right now, what they need is your love, your support, your understanding, and your hope. They're looking for anything, that any kind of hope they can hold on to, even yours. You know.
Yes.
Right. All right. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you. Hang on. We're going to admit the other two panel members for Q&A. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, Melissa and Christine, would you like to join us, please? They've been filtering for questions. There they are. Here they come. All right. Melissa, good morning. Christine, good morning.
Good morning.
They are our associate producers on the show, and they also manage our audience engagement and filter for questions on our show Saturday mornings. All right, what we have going, Christine?
Yeah, so we have a lot of comments. It's been a really powerful discussion. So I'll just start with some comments from people, just going through similar things. Barbara Stewart says, after watching this, I'm scared for my son to go to trial. After a year in county jail, his next hearing on December 15th will be a Franks hearing or something like that. He has a $1 million bond for some damn reason. He's 42. He was 18 when he had his first incident. Another 14 years later. No violence. We're going crazy now with this COVID pandemic. His brother already took his own life. I can't lose my only son. And then we have Heather and Cordonier Land. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. She just mentioned that Heather, I'm sorry if I'm not phrasing this correctly, but she's just reiterating that we need reform. She took a plea because she and her husband had kids. It was 3 years compared to 30 to 90 years. And then finally, Angie Black says, thank you for everything you stand for with our inmates. My son is serving a life sentence without parole under our unjust aiding and abetting law here in Michigan. Yeah, so those were just 3 people sharing their stories. And then for questions, we had Karen Denise asks, why do our legislators / lawmakers continue to permit this approach to criminal justice?
Tinsae?
I'm sorry, did you say prevent or promote?
Permit.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier in the panel about the trial system. There are different players in it. Of course, lawmakers can do their part and abolish mandatory minimums to take away some of that coercive nature of plea bargaining. But there are also other actors in the system, judges as well too, and prosecutors, what they can do to take away the trial penalty. But certainly for lawmakers, there's a role that they play, and they can, you know, advance reform and take away the coercive nature of the trial penalty.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, so you can go.
Yeah. So sort of on the following up on the heels of that, we have Helen who asks, why did legislators transfer power from judges to prosecutors? Why did that happen?
We've had mandatory minimums in the country forever, but they became more popular in the 80s and 90s when crime was rising. And there were sort of two motivations. One was just to impose harsher punishments because crime was high, and they thought, you know, sentencing people to longer sentences was the right approach. And two, there was a seeming disparity that if you one judge was lenient and one judge was harsh, and people thought that the system was unfair and that it was sort of luck of the draw sentencing. And so they wanted to create some uniformity across the system. And so that's what they thought mandatory sentences would do. And, you know, it hasn't had that impact, but I think the motivation was, you know, were those two things, you know, having uniformity and just being tougher. I mean, people thought that people weren't serving enough time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So again, along these lines, another contributor, Kathy Cohen, says, what is the solution to reforming the whole government system, which I think you've already touched on, but maybe just some more information. And then why do judges get paid if they aren't even making the decisions?
Well, that's fair. Yeah, obviously, and Tinsae talked about this, I mean, we need to take away these tools, these hammers that the prosecutors have. So you have to get rid of mandatory sentences. And just restore the idea that we want judges to have discretion. And people have weird views of judges. They, you know, people think that somehow judges are soft, and it's not. I mean, but when they'll tell you sentencing is the hardest part of the job because they have somebody sitting in front of them, their families in the courtroom crying. You know, it's like it's the most difficult thing they do is to try to fashion an appropriate sentence. So we want to restore discretion to judges. And so the only way to do that is to get rid of mandatory sentences. Again, the idea of like not paying judges, they want to do their job. And that's what you saw Kevin Sharp in the movie. I mean, he resigned because he wasn't able to do his job and he felt like he didn't want to be a party to injustice. So we want our judges, trust me.
Thank you.
Ruby and Gil asks, are there FAMM branches across the country?
So FAMM we're a national organization, and we're based in Washington, D.C., but we do have target states that we work in, but we also have members across the country. And fortunately now we have a coalition manager so that if you, wherever you are in the country, if you are trying to rally up your community, you could definitely reach out to us. We can see what we can do to support you in your advocacy and give you tools. So though we don't have branches across the country, we are able to, especially with the virtual world, connect with people across the country.
What are your target states?
Arizona, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Virginia.
And how did you determine those as target states?
Well, with Florida and Pennsylvania, those have been states that FAMM has worked in for a couple of years now. Same with Arizona, actually, and in Virginia, which is our newer state that we're going into, the lawmakers in that state have shown interest that they actually want to repeal their mandatory minimums. So we want to go in there and support that.
And if a state wants to become one of your target states, what are the steps? If they want to be like a branch of or a chapter of FAMM, is that possible?
I mean, we don't have the resources to be in every state as we'd like. I mean, we'd love to be active in every legislature if we could. So we picked states where we think we can make a difference and where the laws are particularly bad. Florida is a hard state to make progress, but their laws are so bad, so we've been there for a number of years. In the other states where we're not physically present, as Tinsae said, we have a coalition manager who is trying to help empower the families that are there I mean, it's not necessarily a chapter, but if, you know, we're trying to create groups in each state.
Mhm.
And if we can do that, we will support people in any state. I mean, because, you know, we have draft legislation, you know, we have storytelling team that can work with them. We can do profiles of cases to highlight the need for reform. So we're trying to support the states where we're not physically there. And so if people are active in a state and they can pull together a group, you know, of some critical mass of, you know, 10 families who want to act in concert, we would love to support those efforts.
Okay, great. That's good to know. That's good to know. All right, Christine, any other questions?
Yeah, well, I think a follow-up is from the same person. Is there a database resource at the state local level of lawyers who do pro bono work? The young man described by Mrs. McKinney needs a new lawyer now.
That's, you know, we hear that a lot. I mean, we hear people who, you know, need attorneys, and it is hard. We've just worked on a project at the federal level where we matched hundreds or thousands of people who were seeking compassionate release to get out from COVID from the prisons, in the federal prisons, with pro bono attorneys. But those are always hard to find and to train and to get them away from the work that they're doing. So I'm not aware of a database, but the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is an organization I would reach out to just to see what's available. It's NACDL, and they may be able to help. We're not in a position to provide attorneys for people. We don't even refer people to attorneys because, you know, we don't know how that's going to go. And I will also say this: we see a lot of people, especially people inside prison, get taken advantage of by attorneys who, you know, will charge them a lot of money for things that they're not going to get out, but they don't know, and the families are desperate. So we really try to shy away from that, and people should be careful.
Great. Melissa?
Yeah, just to come back to, Tinsae was talking about repealing the mandatory minimums. So for people who are hearing this morning and going, okay, I want to do that, and you said to email someone, but can you just walk me through that process from point A to B to C so that I know that I'm doing the right thing? Can you just reiterate that process for our viewers? How do they repeal or try to repeal mandatory minimums?
Yeah, so I think, I guess from the more practical side, it might be the easiest to go to FAMM.org, and we have on our website an action center where once you type in your address, it shows you all of your lawmakers from federal all the way down to your state rep and senator. So those, you know, your state rep and senator, those are the folks that you would definitely want to reach out to and let them know you don't support mandatory minimums or whatever other reforms that you are advocating for. So the easiest way is FAMM.org, Action Center, and then from there you just type in your address and you know exactly who to email. We have their email addresses, we have their Twitter account, so if you want to tweet them, if you want to send them a message on Facebook, there are, you know, so many different ways of contacting your lawmaker and getting their attention.
Okay, and for the listener then who is going to go do that this morning, what should they expect? You know, if they actually do that work to send the email and to reach out, should they expect any type of reply? You know, what's sort of the follow-up to that then?
Well, I think it depends where you are. I know that I've taken action sometime and my state rep emails me back or somebody from their office and lets me know, you know, I received this email or this is an issue that I'm also interested in and I'm monitoring it. Or maybe you might not get a response, and I think that's where you can follow up with another email or go on Twitter or, you know, reach out to other families that you know are impacted by the same issue, care about the same issue, and see if maybe you can kind of get a, you know, a group going that could then advocate for the same thing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Do we have time for one more question, Elaine?
We do.
So the next question I have is you talked about a storytelling team, Kevin, and Christine and I are graduate students getting our license in art therapy. And so my question is kind of twofold for you. I have this idea that I'm sure is not new to anyone, but just the concept of replacing punishment with rehabilitation and using therapy and all the wonderful tools that we do have available in the world to help people heal. And this question also goes to Sandra as well. I mean, you mentioned in the film about, you know, going through therapy yourself and how transformative that was. I just wonder what role both therapy and artistic activism can play in the work that FAMM is doing right now.
And Melissa, you're gonna hold that question.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a question for the master class that we just heard. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. All right.
You hold that question. Okay. I mean, it's an awesome question, but you know, save that for the master class.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Christine, any other questions coming your way?
Yeah, just a couple more. So Daleen Tyler asked, could someone answer this question? If the DA makes a deal, why is it the judge don't go by it? And then the clarification to that is in cases where judges hand down longer sentences than recommended by the DA.
Yeah, I mean, the judge ultimately does have, unless it's a mandatory sentence, the judge has discretion and can review the plea deal and accept it or not. I had a friend who was sentenced earlier this year. The government offered a 2 to 3 year deal. That's what they were recommending, between 2 and 3 years. If he pled guilty, he did. And they went to his sentencing, and the judge ripped up the plea deal and gave him 7 years, which was a shock. But that, you know, when judges have discretion, they're allowed to use it. They don't have to follow the prosecutor's recommendation. They may see things differently. And sometimes there's a good reason for that, because prosecutors will make deals with sort of the kingpin of a conspiracy, where that person gets a low sentence, and then you have some underling or some street level dealer who's getting hammered. And so sometimes you want the judges to look for themselves at how those deals were cut. And so, you know, I don't like anyone getting a harsher sentence. So, but I do like the idea of judges, you know, having some discretion over that. So they don't have to follow the plea negotiations. They still, that's just a recommendation at that point from the prosecutor.
Great.
And then just one more question on my end. Ruby Entgill asks, does the Innocence Project get involved in cases where there has not been a conviction?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's, you know, they wait until they look to remedy false convictions, but I think there has to be a conviction before they get involved.
That is correct. Okay, Melissa?
That's all the questions I have from viewers this morning.
Okay, well, that's our Q&A segment with the viewers. This has been extraordinary, and I trust that this is not the end. We need to stay connected on this issue, come back and continue to keep educating the folks about this, and even being able to share what's happening in the targeted states that you guys have efforts going, because we need to make sure that people stay aware. Sandra, Karla, Kevin, Tinsae, thank you all so much. This has been a very rich and rewarding discussion. I'm thinking of so many different ways that we can support via the show, repurposing our live show content in order to put it out on different mediums, so that folks can get it the best way they know how. And where connections need to be made, please make them. We've heard about the young man in Kansas City. If anybody has resources or information that you want to reach out to Ms. McKinney, please do so. Do you have, how would you prefer people to reach out to you, Ms. McKinney?
Yes, I would prefer to be reached out by my email, which is KYSM2012@gmail.com.
Again, that's KYSM2012@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Okay. Sandra, Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Stories, awesome work. Tinsae, thank you for your efforts on the ground at the legislative level. And Kevin, your story, awesome. Your work as the president. We need to stay connected, okay? All right. And to our listening audience on our Facebook show page and our collaborative partner, Real STL News, our family on Real STL News page, thank you so much. I trust that this has been enriching for you as well. And we will see you in about 2 weeks, because we will not have a show this weekend coming up. It is Thanksgiving weekend. We're all
Yes.
taking a break. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Y'all, please be safe. Watch your gatherings, wear your masks, but still enjoy your family and be grateful. Be grateful. Again, thank you and God bless.